Happy Friday. I'm Tilini signing off from a very productive week. And if this is the first time you're watching my videos, I'm a transformation and change lead in software consultancy. Today, the topic I want to bring is why do transformation projects fail when everything is clear? As I promised, I've been working on the first week gap map that will help any new person joining the workforce or experienced person moving to a new role or new domain to identify focus areas that will help you succeed in your role and provide value to your company or role you're joining in. While making that framework and tool set, I also realized some of these tools would help my transformation, change management, and delivery folk to get value from the same tool set and avoid the missing of budget, time, and quality of what you're delivering, whether it be a transformation, change management, product, project, or delivery. Reason for this is before you select a framework or a tool, you should know the symptom and clearly identify the underlying root cause for the symptom. And in my case, 90% of the time, whether it's budget, time, or quality, it was always related to similar symptoms, and those similar symptoms were always connected to a common root cause related to those symptoms. Let me know if you experience otherwise, because I'm keen to learn as well. If you haven't heard yet, watermelon project is a very common scenario these days in software deliveries. Green on outside, but red underneath. And this what makes them so tricky. From delivery point of view, the status reports are green. The plan has already been signed off. Jira is running, backlog exists, the team is staffed with experienced people, people are committed. And the part I find interesting is as soon as there's a drift of a timeline or cost or quality, people start panicking. They start looking at different delivery methods, extra people, extra money. But what you should actually look at is 3 areas and how clear these 3 areas are to make sure if all your tools are set on the right path. Scope clarity, execution clarity, and shared understanding. Are we clear on the destination? Are we clear on the path? Are the people aligned on the same picture? Because clarity helps us understand what needs to happen. And beyond this is the most important, leadership and governance. Because we can have clarity, what helps execution is the sponsorship, decisions, priorities, resources, and setting right accountability. But these questions only become useful when we turn them into something we can actually understand, observe, and act on. For scope clarity, who are we solving for? What's the problem? What's changing? What outcome we want to achieve? What success look like? And importantly, how do we measure it? If you look at execution clarity, what are the milestones and what are the key deliverable activities in the milestone? What needs discovery before delivery? Who owns what? And what is the definition of done? In shared understanding, we have to check if right people understand the outcome. Does the team understand their role? If priorities, trade-offs, risks are clear and well understood across the team. What I find really amusing is leadership or teams does not register this as lack of clarity. Sometimes missing clarity does not look like missing clarity. We see the symptoms first. In my experience, when these clarity gaps are present, they often show up in missed core measures of success. Cost, time, and quality. Lack of scope clarity can eventually show up as budget pressures. Lack of execution clarity can show up as missed timeline, repeated delays, unknown dependencies, and halted work. A weak shared understanding can show up in adoption, customer experience, and user experience. These are often visible outcomes, but the team and users feel may say something really different. And this really interesting model called Lippitt Knoster model, please look it up, and it will show the feeling and atmosphere of the team and what is actually missing. So I've mapped these pillars of clarity to Mary Lippitt model, and this will give you a great understanding to keep your project on track and to read on to your team's feelings and find out what might be lacking. Vision is the core component of scope clarity. If there's no vision, there will be confusion in the team. If there's vision, tools to use is Miro, Confluence, Jira Product Discovery. I do not recommend using things like Visio, Word, because they can have multiple versions and it often creates more confusion. So you can also use frameworks like persona, journey, process map, scope outcome decisions, and opportunity outcome initiative mapping. This is at high level, not broken down at task level. That belongs into execution clarity. And for execution clarity, you need skills. For skills, when it's lacking, there would be anxiety present. When there's no credible action plan, it creates false starts. Or sometimes, when there's no psychological safety, people will stop raising risks or challenging assumptions or saying, I think this might not work in 2 weeks. And then is when teams will start creating fake positivity. Everything needs to look okay, everything needs to stay green. Even when people closest to work can see that something isn't right, the actually very useful metaphor which I introduced, the watermelon project, happens, which is green outside but red underneath. What will happen in this scenario is slowly sprint after sprint, suddenly 1 or 2 checkpoints missed and put on hold. And pattern keeps happening. And then what happens is all these pile up, hold on decisions, mixed up dependencies, create missed deadlines. Tools to be used to gain execution clarity is Jira, Epic Stories, clear acceptance criteria with timelines, and mirror dependencies with critical path mapped clearly with cross dependencies and resource needs. And also you can use MS Project, Smart Sheets for milestones and critical dependencies, as well as you can have registers with risk assumptions and dependencies. Third point is shared understanding. When there's no consensus, we can see misalignment and rework. In this model, there would be people who would be sabotaging because they don't agree with the pathway, or there would be rework where people work on their own path, not knowing what others are doing, and later it become a mismatch. Second aspect of shared understanding is incentives. When there's no incentives or meaningful reason for people to support the change, there will be resistance. And when there's no resources to deliver, you can see frustrations from users and team. When there's lack of shared understanding, tools you can use is Miro for alignment workshops, ownership decisions, open forums where people talk about problems and impacts to understand their point of view, and then change and impact map where if there's decisions to look at those impacted areas later, the scope, make it clear and centralized. The takeaway from this is the thing we see on the surface may not be the problem we want to fix. As a change manager, transformation agent, adoption specialist or business analyst, or product manager working on a customer problem, what you need to do is actually get into the real problem underlying the symptom. And the skill you need here is observation. More than tools, observing and interpreting what needs to happen is the critical skill for a person who's driving the change. Look for the patterns, not for single incidents. A missed deadline is one event. Repeated missed deadlines are a pattern. One unclear decision is an issue, but same decision being reopened creates something deeper. Multiple lockers appearing around the same dependency may point to a structural problem. This is where the skill of observation can be useful. Having the observation, recognizing the pattern, having open conversation, and then turning it to an insight where you can use to course correct, cost, time, or adopt implementation problems early in the project help you more than any tool or any practice or changing of resources or methods. If there's one tool I would recommend for deliveries, would be Miro. If you don't have a huge budget, Miro have wide ranges of templates where you can have dependency maps, critical paths, user personas, project plans, timelines, milestones, etc. So, and also it's centralized. You wouldn't have multiple versions of truth. So when it's centralized and well maintained in a place, this is a great tool to create vision, execution, as well as shared understanding. And I am not sponsored by Miro. To give you more understanding of how this actually looks like in a real life scenario, I'll put some examples. Let's have a look. Scope clarity. A bad example is we need a new customer portal by October. Sounds quite clear, but what are the customer roles? What is the customer problem we're going to solve? What features model is become in scope and out of scope? What is the success for go live? And what is the success measures? A good example rather would be we want to reduce the effort for X customer group completely by implementing Y process. So in here, customer group is defined, problems validated, current process understood, desired outcome defined, and what's in out of scope as well as success measures is agreed. For execution, we have a go live date by November or October, and what we do now to then is not clear. You have high level milestones like testing, UAT, go live, no meaningful tasks, and discovery is mixed with delivery, and delivery starts before considering discovery. And tasks has no owners, and done is subjective, and sometimes work starts even before the prerequisites are read. Therefore, it keeps on getting halted and things get into on hold bucket. A good example would be discovery, design, decision, build, test, and every milestone having an owner, date, clear dependencies, entry and exit criteria, clearly mapped that it can flow without friction. On shared understanding, a bad example would be we have shared risks and decisions in Jira. Nobody understands it. In scope, out of scope is dispersed. There's multiple blockers affecting the progress. Change of plans happens suddenly. And then there's dependencies that come up as unknowns for the project. And therefore, sometimes you can have multiple documents, but having access to them would not give shared understanding for group of people. A good example is everyone can explain the same core scenario. Why we are doing it, what we are doing it, who's responsible, and when do we need it. What success looks like and what failure looks like. What are the trade-offs and what are the workarounds for the trade-offs. Therefore, understanding this will help you move from a delivery chaos to a delivery clarity. Then underneath this all clarity pillars, there's foundational leadership and governance. Because having a clear destination and vision, having a clear credible execution path and milestones, and having a shared understanding will not work if everything is priority one. So leadership is a core component and governance is the one that tracks all the progress of execution as well as shared understanding. If important decisions remain unresolved, if resources exist on the plan but don't have capacity, if delivery teams own problems but doesn't have authority to solve them, and then clarity alone isn't enough. Good governance make priorities explicit, decisions clear, escalation path usable, reporting well defined, and capacity realistic. And Leaders should be there with clear understanding of priorities, decisions, and trade-offs with the mitigation action with clear understanding of the effect for user personas and groups. Most important takeaway from this is tool doesn't create clarity by themselves. Jira can track unclear work. Miro can visualize unclear strategy. One Confluence can document risks and decisions that kept reopening. So thinking has to come first. And the team needs a way to keep that thinking alive throughout the delivery. Open working forums, clear decision making, visible risk and dependencies, changes to plan understood, and a safe environment where people can say something has changed. This assumption is no longer true, or we need to rethink the plan. Because transformation isn't about creating perfect plan. Deliveries are not protecting a plan from a change. It's about having enough shared clarity to understand when something changes, what impacts, and how team needs to pivot. When you experience a core success measure breach like over budget, overtime, or user conflict, before adding another tracker, another progress update, another meeting, I would first ask, are we clear on destination and outcomes? Are we clear of what right users should do and the dependencies they have? Do we have a credible action plan with critical path mapped? Does the leadership and governance help teams to deliver what they want on time by unblocking decisions and accepting trade-offs with right understanding? Because most of the time, what looks like a delivery risk is a clarity risk that has not been clarified on time, piled up, and became more costly. So, therefore, coming on Discovery First Week Gap Map is going to cover tools and frameworks that will address these core parts as well, which will help transformation, delivery, change managers, or adoption leaders who are trying to help people adopt to new systems and new processes. So stay tuned in. That will be coming soon. Thank you and good night.